Good morning. I'm Pastor Mike, excited to be with all of you this morning. Like Justin said, we've been in a series this past month called Say What, where we've been talking about a bunch of different Christian cliches and talking about the good in them and maybe some things that we need to double check. So go back, though, if you missed any of those. There's a few of them that we already did. One of them was called I'll Pray For You. And the other one was when God closes a door, he opens a window. Those are on our YouTube channel. You can watch them there. You can also watch or listen on our website. We have a set of questions on there as well for you to take the sermon and discuss them with your family, with your friends, or with your small group as well. So those are available online. Don't miss those. If you did, you can go back and catch them. Before I get into the cliche today, though, I've got a little survey for you. So here's my question for you. What are 5 things that we should hold on to in life to keep us safe? All right, you can talk. You can turn to your neighbor. What are the top 5 things you need to hold on to in life to keep you safe? Ready to go. You guys are doing good discussion. That's great. So let's talk about these. Let me see if you got the same things I did. One of these is handrails, right? You got to hold on to a handrail because especially when it's slippery, it gets icy, right? Then you're going to fall, and that's no good for anybody. Another one, rope swings, right? If you're swinging on a rope swing, you got to make sure you hang on until the right time. Otherwise, that can be pretty catastrophic. Anybody had that failure before? That's okay. Don't raise your hand. It's just me. Your significant other's hand. This is an important one. Keeps you safe. Also kind of cute, right? We all need a good physical touch in our life. The steering wheel of your car. I know I see some of y'all out there, right? You're doing the no-handed driving. Let's not do that. Let's put our hands on the steering wheel. That's a good one to hold on to keep us safe. Here's another one. Your passport. You should hold on to your passport. I had this happen, actually. I was on a youth trip a while back, years ago, and I had a student on the trip, and they had lost their passport, and they didn't realize it until like the last 2 days of the trip. Come to find out it was stuffed in the bottom of their luggage, and because of how they had put things in there, it had ripped in half. That's a fun experience, right? You're in another country, and now you have to go to the embassy to figure out how you're going to get this kid home. Hold on to your passport. That's an encouraging thing. Now, I looked these up online. Actually, these are Mike's top 5. They're the first 5 that came to my brain. I couldn't find the top 5, so maybe you got some of these. Maybe you got some different ones. But I'm going to give you Mike's bonus one. This is the one that I need to hold on to for safety, and it's Reese's, okay? Hey, don't be laughing at me. This is serious. I love Reese's. It's a problem in my life. And, if I leave them out, I know some of y'all really like Reese's too, and then they just go away. And then I got a problem. I got no Reese's left. That's the problem I'm in right now, okay? I'm working on it, though. I have a problem with these things. I eat them by the sleeve, so I got to cut myself off. And I'm trying to turn a leaf over, to let go of these things a little bit. And so this winter, I had all these mini Reese's, right? Those little ones, I don't know what they're called, mini Reese's peanut butter cups. And I put them in a bowl on my desk, right? Like, that's a good step in the right direction. I'm trying to share. Now, if you know where my office is, it's the last office in the offices, and nobody else goes back there except for Justin and I. So I don't know if it's that big of a step, but it's a step. Justin got to see that there's Reese's on my desk. He's not allowed to touch them, but I'm trying to let go of my Reese's addiction. And that brings us to our question, our cliche today. The cliche is let go and let God. You heard that one before? Let go and let God. These are all over the place. You can get them on coffee mugs. You can get them on t-shirts. I noticed at Walmart, I was telling the team before this, at Walmart you can actually get a shirt that says let go and let God. So maybe you have that. That's awesome. But this is one that's pretty common, and it is out there. And there's some good things about it, and there's some things that maybe we want to think about when we say this or when we hear this. The good, and I think the intent behind this, is pushing us to let go of the things in this world that we're trying to control of and to trust God, right? It's pushing us towards trusting God. That's great. That's a good thing to do. As a matter of fact, if you know this verse, is the verse that I always think of when I think of trust God. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." If you're looking for a verse to memorize, this is a great one to memorize. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. So he's telling us to trust in God, right? Don't lean on yourself. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And I think my paths are pretty straight by myself, but if I look back, a lot of times they're pretty all over the place. But if we get our paths straight by God, that's the way to do it, because it's going to be focused on what he wants us to do. So it's biblical to trust in God. And there's lots of things that we need to trust God with, right? Not just the silly things we talked about a minute ago, but in our life, we need to trust God with our fear. We need to be willing to let go of our anger and our shame, our guilt and our grudges, our fear of missing out and people pleasing. There's all kinds of things that would be good for us to let go of our control on. The problem that we have is that if we let go of these things, we don't have control of them anymore, right? Or at least our perceived control. The news flash of this line is that we don't really have control of them anyways. But we see this in our lives, and this is what the cliche is trying to push against. Let go and let God. And it's all over in the Bible as well. You can see this struggle with fear and control. We're going to take a look at one story today. This is going to be our main story that we're going to focus on. And we're going to be in Matthew 14. So if you've got your Bible, you can open to Matthew 14 or pull it up on your device. We'll have it on the screens as well in a minute here. But Matthew 14, and as you're flipping there, let me just catch you up with what's kind of happening. Jesus and his disciples had just finished doing some work in an area, and they are done for the day, and now the disciples, he sends them ahead of him to start going. And Jesus, like he does, takes a moment, he's alone, and wants just some time to talk with his Father, to talk with God. So his disciples go out ahead of him, they take off, right? Jesus is on shore, they get in a boat, and they are away from shore, way off, right? So we got that? Jesus on shore, disciples in the boat. We're going to be in verse 25. Verse 25. And read a couple verses here, and then we'll catch up with the rest of the story as we go. Verse 25 says, "Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. 'It's a ghost,' they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid.'" Right? So we see the disciples here, they've got the fear setting upon them. They see somebody walking on the water. That's pretty unusual. And they think it's a ghost. And that's their struggle in the moment. And that's the good of this verse, right? It's calling us to let go of those fears and to listen to the words of, like Jesus said here, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." He's inviting them to trust in him. Let go of their fear and to trust in him. And that's the good that this phrase is talking about. There's a few things to avoid, though, so let's talk about these. And one of the things is if we take this verse a little bit, this cliche, we take it a little bit too far. Let go and let God. So if we take it to the point of, well, I'm just going to let go of this thing and let God do it, and I'm going over here, I'm letting it go, God's got it, I'm not worried about it, I'm not worried about him, and I just go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum of this is out of mind, out of sight, not worrying about it, God's got it. There's a piece of the not worry that's good, but it's when we totally abdicate it and say, nope, this is out of here, gone, that we've missed it. when we let it go like the great prophet Elsa taught us to, right? You heard her. She says to let it go, but when we take it too far and we think that it has no responsibility for us, like we have a balloon in our hand and we just let the balloon go and it floats away, right? And then we just watch it. So it's more like we just let go and watch it. That's kind of the extreme of what we might hear when we hear this, is let go, just watch it happen. You don't have to do anything. And there's times, right, like you can go through the Bible where God tells us to wait, or he tells us to be still, or he tells us to be silent and let him have the vengeance, all of those things. But again, there still is a call to us to be focused on him. So we're not just watching and letting it go and completely avoiding it, but we're focused on God and we're diving into what his plan is. And sometimes that plan means that we need to act with a tangible action. Sometimes it means wait. Sometimes it means be still. But we've got to listen and be in tune with his spirit to know what that is. So trusting God, having faith in God, doesn't mean we do nothing. As a matter of fact, if you were to jump over to James 2:26, you don't have to go there. I'll just pull it up for you so you can see it. It says, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. So faith without deeds is dead. Faith, trust, belief requires action. It merits action. It means that we are acting because that's us outworking what that means. So ultimately, we keep on acting under his leadership. That's what we're called to do. Let's jump back into our story, though. Matthew 14, verse 28. It says, Lord, remember Jesus just told him, he comes out on the water, and they cry, and they're all afraid. And he says, and then Peter responds to him. He says, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. You see that? So for him to let go of the fear that there's a ghost in front of him, it required him to do something. He couldn't just watch it. God invited him in because he wants him to trust him more. He says, no, come to me. Walk on the water. And Peter, with courage, does that. That's kind of like I want that same kind of trust. I want to step in that kind of way to trust God. So when we let go, we listen to God. Instead of, I don't know if you're like me, but in my life, I tend to want to just force my own solution on things. Instead, we trust God with it. We do what he says with it, trusting that his way is the way. And basically taking this thing, whatever it is in our lives, and putting it in its place, saying, nope, God, you are my number one. This thing in my life that I need to let go of is not number one. It's not my number one priority. You are God. I'm going to focus on you. So the answer isn't us. It's not by our control, our strength. It's God's. So that's the good, right? We've got the good. We've got the good is to trust God. That's what it's telling us to do, to trust God. And there's one thing to avoid, and that's the no responsibility idea. Those are a couple pieces. There's one more, though, and this one kind of sneaks up on you. So the second part of that phrase, right, we've got let go and let God, right? This is the part that I'm going to get a little nitpicky on, right? So it sounds like if I say I'm going to let God do something, or I'm going to give God the control, it kind of sounds like I'm the one that's letting God do something, that I'm the one that's saying that he can do it, right? He's waiting for my commands. It's kind of like God is this little genie in a bottle, and he's just sitting in there waiting for me to tell him that he can work, right? Like that's where I go with this. It's a little cringy when I say it like that, right? Maybe you heard this phrase from a while back. Jesus, take the wheel. Remember that one? It's a song. Jesus, take the wheel. Charles, can I be in the band? Maybe not. But That's the whole idea there, is Jesus take the wheel with that. The problem is he's already got the wheel. It's us that tries to take it. Reminds me, this whole idea though, reminds me of the book of Job. I want to jump us over to there. You don't have to jump over there, but it's a really good chunk. It puts me in my place, kind of a chunk. But Job, if you don't remember this story, Job was a guy, he had it all at one point in his life. He had money, he had position, he had a huge family, he had land. He had it all. Everything was going good for him. And then it's all taken away, and eventually he starts to question God on it. And God's response is awesome. Let's take a look at it here. Just going to read a few verses in Job 38. Here we go. Job 38:4. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? This is God's response to Job. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. If I look at those verses, it kind of just, he put Job in his place, but he kind of puts us all in our place. And there's a lot of things there. If you keep on reading that whole chunk, it's really good because it kind of just reminds me of all the things that God knows and is able to do. And it's things that, like, we're still trying to figure out, like, hey, how did this, what were things like at the beginning of the earth? And how did all that work? And the thing is we'll do our best and we can do research and we can figure some of this out, but we weren't there. God was. And God knows. And that should give us confidence and trust in him. So you got to keep on reading. Check that out later. Read more. Because the reality is, we don't really let God do anything. We don't give God control. He's already got it. Like I said, maybe you're looking at me and you're like, Mike, you're being a little bit like focused on one word, a little bit nitpicky. And maybe I am, but I believe with this that it's super important that anytime that there's something that makes God a little bit less and us a little bit more, than when it makes us have a little tiny God and makes us way bigger, that there's a problem there. And that's what we're fighting against. As a matter of fact, we've been fighting against this since the beginning. If you go back to the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, right? You've got Adam and Eve, the first people on earth, and God has put out a tree, and that tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they're not supposed to take the fruit from it. And what do? They take the fruit from the tree. That choice was just a little choice, but they chose. They said, nope, God said that this is what's best, and we said, nope, this is what's best. And so their choice was to say, I know a little better than God, so I'm a little bit more, and he's a little bit less. And I think that's the problem here, too, is when we say we let God, we're saying God's a little tinier, and I'm a little bigger. So instead of us letting God, let's think about a different way to say this. There's a few other ways I think you could say, let go, let God, that would help us to avoid some of those things. The first one is to let go and trust God. Let go and trust God. But that one, sometimes I think when we think of trust, we don't always think of an action, so I wanted to throw another one, let go and follow God, right? That requires us to move a little bit more. And the last one I love the most, let go and embrace God. There's a lot here, right? Like we can think of embrace as a hug, but when you think of hugging somebody, or you think of embracing something, it means that you completely embrace, you take on, you believe in, you follow, you trust in what that is. In this case, we're talking about embracing God. I embrace God, who he is, his story, his mission, his great love for us. It draws us into more than just let go and let God. Let's jump back to our story here. In the last two verses, of this story for us today. All right. But when he saw the wind, when Peter saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" I love this story because it's kind of like all of us, right? Like, I want to walk out on the water like Peter did for a lot of reasons, but I want to walk out on the water like Peter did, have some faith. But most of the time, when I'm trying to trust God, I end up sinking. I lose sight of God. And I love Jesus' response, and I love it because he actually says immediately twice in this verse, because Jesus reaches out his hand immediately to catch him. I want you to remember that. Peter did the right thing. He looks back, he said, "God, save me." And immediately he reaches out his hand. So when we get stuck, we call out for him and we reach out, and he reaches out to help us. I love that picture. And I want you to get this too. Like, if I look at this story, maybe I'm taking the story too far, but I look at it, and his problem is he's having a problem with walking on the water, right? And Jesus helps him with that. It doesn't say that he all of a sudden fixed all of Peter's problems in his whole life. There's nothing else wrong with him there. He helped him with that problem in the moment so that he could continue the mission that they're all on. The mission that they're all on. So my encouragement to us today, my encouragement to myself today, is to let go of the things in our lives that are trying to control us and to embrace God. Let go and embrace God. As I begin to wrap up here, I'm going to have the worship team start making their way up here. So in my life and in your life, I encourage us to let go of the attempted control on our life, to let go of the anger that's in our life that we're holding on to because we think that this thing is going to get us what we want, or the fears in our life that we think will get us what we want, or this shame and the guilt that's been holding you down and has been your number one focus in your life. Or the fear of missing out, or looking back at your past and thinking about how you want to change it. Letting go of those things, realizing that God is the one who's in control, and to embrace God and his story. See, he has a huge story of love for you and for me. And he's chasing after you, and he wants you to know his love too, to trust him, to keep your eyes fixed on him, to give up these things in our life, and to be a part of the mission that we're all on together. Let me pray for us. Father God, thank you so much for this morning. Thank you that you are a God who is with us, who meets us in the storms of our life. When things are rough and when we are focused on the wrong things, when we start getting focused on the things that we're afraid of, when we get focused on controlling the world around us, or when we're focused on how we've been wronged and how we need to make it right. When we are caught up in the world and what it has to offer instead of what you have to offer. And God, I pray as we leave today that you would help us, to open our hands, to let go of the things that we are holding on to so tightly. And ultimately, God, to embrace you, to embrace who you are, to embrace the love that you have for us, to embrace the truth that is about you, that you know everything, that you are over everything, that you are a God that is abundant in strength and power, and we can trust in you. God, would you help us to even do that today, to have trust in you. And when we sink like Peter does, we trust in you as well to reach your hand and to grab us again. God, we love you. We worship you now. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
Church, I'm going to invite you to stand if you're able as we continue.